Well, hi everyone. It's really great to see so many people interested in water conservation, and I'm very happy to be here to talk to you. This is the second time this talk has been presented, but there have been a few changes and additions based on the questions that people asked last time. So hopefully that will address some of your interests and concerns. And also, this presentation is being recorded and will be available on the city website. So while you're welcome to take notes or whatever you need to do, it will be available to you. So any of the written information in the presentation you can look at online, so you don't need to write all of those websites and things down. Okay, is that a little better? I'm practically have the microphone in my mouth, so. Yeah, so can people hear me now? Yes. I will try to speak up. And this talk is mostly about ways of taking out your turf. And there are some references to both why you might want to, which I think for many of you here, you already want to. So I may not have to convince you. But there are also some interesting things that you might want to do with your design, but this is not a design presentation. As Dawn mentioned, there will be another talk in October. And finally, I just want to thank Dawn and Jennifer and the City of Davis for putting these talks on. There's been a really great set of speakers and talks on water conservation. So, and they are all available online. So let's get started. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about an introduction. I'm going to talk about why you might want to think about taking your lawn out. We'll talk about what you need to do to plan your project. And then it will be, most of the slideshow will be about techniques and tips for taking out your lawn. And finally, some design ideas and sources. So keep that in mind as we go through the slideshow. I have to point this right at the... So Dawn has already talked to you about some of the City of Davis mandatory requirements, so I'm not going to go too much into that, other than to congratulate all of us, all the Davis residents, for how well we're doing. And also to just comment on the fact that while people have been doing quite well, most of us also would like to have landscapes that we can enjoy and appreciate. So we're seeing a lot of brown landscapes, a lot of brown lawn, and we need to accept more of that, but we also want to try to have landscapes that we can enjoy and use for many purposes. Finally, I know that we're all excited about the possibility of an El Nino year, but the reality is that California is a drought climate no matter how much rain we get each year. So what we're all doing now in this fourth year of the prolonged drought is going to help us no matter how much rain we get. So I'd just like to say that not all lawns are bad. There are good reasons for having lawns, large gathering spaces, active recreation, and there are also lawn-like substitutes that may look like lawn but take a lot less water. So we're not going to totally villainize lawns, but we do want to figure out ways to have landscapes that require less water. So here's a quick example of a landscape that can look really great at a front entrance that doesn't have to have any lawn in it. So here are some of the reasons that we're going to talk about for why to remove your lawn. And I think that it really is helpful to recognize all of the benefits. Even if you're certain you want to do this, it's good to know what some of the environmental and personal benefits are for removing your lawn. I think we definitely all have a somewhat new landscape aesthetic. Part of that is the fact that we're accepting more brown lawns in our landscape, but there's also some beautiful styles of landscape plantings and surfaces that we don't just need huge, large lawns like we live on golf courses. The sustainability impacts are huge in so many ways, and I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail. But we reduce our water use and increase drought tolerance. It saves quite a bit of energy to not have lawns. And as a matter of fact, I just was going to mention that you can save energy just by the lawns that you do keep, just keep them mowed less low. So you'll use less water and less energy if you don't mow your existing lawns quite as frequently. There's a lot of environmental terms like zero waste gardening, green gardening, and those are important, and not having so many lawns helps us avoid the use of so many chemicals, because lawns are really a place where you have a lot of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, that kind of thing. So we're looking at low maintenance and cost-effective landscapes, other types of plantings, as well as providing food and flowers and other things that help us have a healthy lifestyle. In addition to that, a major benefit is habitat enhancement. Lawns are basically monocultures. So when you introduce more types of plants and plants that attract insects and animals and birds, you're helping the environment. And then I already mentioned the cost savings. So just thinking about what can be really beautiful as you drive through our communities, both public and private. There are many options for different ways of an aesthetic that do not have lawns. And both front yards and backyards can have beautiful, beautiful areas that have lots of color and flowers. So some of the sustainability and environmental beliefs that many of us may have can allow us to have climate change happening right in our own front and backyards. And I think that's really important. So we've talked about reducing water use of drip irrigation, which was talked about in one of the sessions, not needing to water as frequently, and selecting plants that are drought tolerant is a real benefit of not having much of your landscape covered by lawns. So it's the lawn-based maintenance that really uses up energy. So by switching, and again, these are just photos to go over what I talked about before. So green gardening can be zero waste, which means that if you're composting on site, if you're not bringing in a lot of materials for your landscape, if you're not taking things out of the landscape, and that's much easier to do without lawn yard clippings and that kind of thing. So I think that we can all try to take care of our landscapes within our own landscapes and try to attain zero waste landscaping in addition to other parts of our lifestyles. One of the key components of having non-lawn areas be low maintenance is having as deep of mulch as you can get away with. Mulch helps with keeping moisture in the soil. It helps add to the good composition of soil, and you don't need to have plants or ground covers covering the whole surface if you've got mulch. So it's a really important component for, it also keeps out weeds, of course. So mulch is something that you can keep adding to your soil, and the deeper it gets, the better the impacts. And there are many, many plants. Of course, California is a Mediterranean climate. We have such a huge array of plants that take very little water, including native plantings and wildflowers. And when you look online or go to your nursery, you will just find so many options for beautiful landscapes in just about any color and texture that you are interested in having. And finally, another environmental benefit is the opportunity to have gardens or even incorporate edible plants within the landscape that you have. So there's a lot of things that can be part of your other planting. And by gardening, we're also improving our healthy lifestyle by being outside and being active and making our landscapes be something that we can use. So the habitat, all the other creatures of the world are very happy that we get rid of our lawns and put in other types of plants. And the cost savings based on all of those things I've just mentioned, with fewer products and not needing to get gas for your mowers and all the rest. There's an investment in switching away from a lawn, but I think it pays off in the long run. So that was my attempt to convince you that you all want to convert your lawns into something else, or at least a majority of them. And as I said, I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir here, but now that you are convinced, what are the steps to get rid of your lawn? So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this part, but what I'm going to be talking about is techniques for getting rid of your lawn, but it really is good to have a plan, to think ahead about what are you going to be doing with the spaces that have been lawn. Are you just going to leave them in mulch, or are you going to do other types of planting? Are you going to grade? What is the master plan for your landscape? And you can do it yourself. There are many, many plans online for planting plan prototypes and lists of plants and design ideas for paving and other surfaces. Or you can get a designer, a landscape contractor or a landscape architect who can help you with that. So there's many ways to go, and it's your own personal preference. Thinking about what your design style is, looking around and seeing what you like, and then trying to incorporate some of that into your own landscape is a really good way to start. Think about your schedule, your budget, and what phasing you might want to do. So you might start with just getting rid of the lawn and put off the planting or irrigation if you need to do that till later. But kind of having, again, both the master plan for what it's going to look like, but also a master plan for how to either do everything all at once or spread out your changes over time to help it be more cost-effective or to work into your own schedule. So, and then finally, and I'm going to mention this several times, remember to take care of the rest of the landscape that you already have. So one of the most important things that needs to happen is to think about your trees. They're going to be there whether or not you have lawn, and so many of our trees are in lawn areas or adjacent to lawn areas, and we're already seeing in the city just because of the drought, even though we may still be irrigating trees, that they're just not getting the same amount of water that they're used to. So I heartily encourage you to keep thinking about watering your trees no matter what the landscape that you decide to install is. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The other thing is maintenance needs. If you just don't want to spend hours and hours in your garden, you just want it for other purposes, don't design a garden that's going to take you hours and hours to maintain. And conversely, if you love working on the garden, factor that in. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're designing your use areas and what you want, where you might be able to go out and sit on the lawn. Now you need to think about what the other ways you can do those same functions that you use your garden for without the lawn. So there are so many project planning books and tools that you can use. Of course, the Sunset Western Garden book is an excellent resource for not only plants but for approaches to doing various things, and they also have the online resources. There are books from East Bay Mud, from Sacramento, from many different sources. One book that I have really appreciated is Sarah Sutton's American Front Yard. It really goes into a lot of detail about most of what we're talking about, and additionally some design ideas. But there are many, many resources that you can use, either to hold it in your hand and peruse the pages, or to, oops, I went backwards, to look online. And here's some of the local online resources that you can use. Don't forget the City of Davis website, but there are also several websites through the university. The California Center for Urban Horticulture has a lot of great links on their website and research that they're doing. The UC Davis Arboretum has information about lawn conversions. They have plant lists. There is the list of the Arboretum All-Stars, among many other things. And if you Google search, or whatever your search engine is, you'll find other things like bay-friendly landscaping. As I said, there are prototypes for landscape designs that you can look through depending on your preference. Many, many resources. These are some of the best ones I found. We also have a number of materials over on the side here that have some lists of online resources and places that you can go. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to pick some of those up. So we're going to talk about 5 techniques for getting rid of your lawn. Some of these can be used in combination, and they sort of build one upon another. The first one is just turning off the water. We see a lot of people that have done that. You just turn it off and you don't come back, as long as you've remembered your trees. But the saying we've all heard, brown is the new green. So that would be the easiest, simplest thing, and maybe people have already done some of that. So we'll talk about that. There is a technique called solarization. It is not necessarily so much used for residential applications, but I will just tell you a little bit about that. Herbicides are a way to go, especially if you have some difficult weed control issues, or if you just are impatient and just want your lawn to be gone immediately. Sod, well, of course it does take a little while, but that's a little faster than some of the other techniques like sheet mulching. You can rent a sod cutter and just lift out the turf, and we'll talk a little bit about that and what you need to do if you do that. And finally, the most current approach is sheet mulching. And I don't know if any of you have seen this technique in practice. It's essentially a method of putting a layer over your sod, your grass, that provides a barrier, and then putting a material on top of that. And what you essentially do is you're composting your lawn right in place. So the most typical layer that is put down is cardboard, just big flat pieces of cardboard. And usually what's put on top of that is some sort of a mulch. But the cardboard could be any natural material. It could be newspapers. It could be cotton sheets or any other natural material. It's just some sort of a barrier. And then, as I said, typically what goes on top is the mulch, but you can also use straw or composted soil or almost anything. And essentially what you're doing is creating layers so that your sod is just dying from being deprived of light and oxygen to some extent, and then composting right in place. So we'll talk about that as well. So here we are back again to talking about the trees, because I can't emphasize this enough. Whether you have very young trees or mature trees, it's really important to consider those trees when you decide what you're doing. And if you haven't been watering your trees at all this summer, I'm hoping that you'll go right home, and as soon as the curfew for watering is done, that you start putting some water on your trees. So their pictures on this website show a bucket method. I'll talk a little bit about that. Using a drip line or a soaker line around the tree. I don't know that you really need to do the deep rod needle method. That's a little bit more complicated. That's the one in the lower left. But you can just put a shower hose attachment method or a sprinkler that goes back and forth or whatever. But some of the most important things to know are that young trees do not yet have their roots fully established, and their roots tend to be closer to the trunk of the tree and not quite so deep. And so young trees need to be watered more frequently than older trees. If the tree is even, say, less than 5 years old, maybe more likely less than 3 years old, you should probably be watering it a couple times a week just to make sure that it has enough water to get the roots established. And what you want to do is also put some mulch around the base of the tree, because as we said before, that retains moisture and helps protect the roots. It shades them a bit, and it just helps the tree get established. With much more mature trees, larger trees, the trick with them is that while they don't need nearly as much water, even once a month is probably okay, they don't get any value from putting water on their trunk, because the roots are probably wider and larger than the whole canopy of the tree. So you need to be watering in the entire drip line and making sure that the water is going down deep. So once or possibly twice a month, you should put some kind of watering on the tree that allows the water to get in deep into the root zone, and that will help protect your tree. So here we are at method 1, just turn it off. So we've seen a lot of this around town. This particular residence does have some small trees. I happen to know that in this case they're being very cautious of their trees. They actually put them there because they were they're eventually going to get rid of their lawn, but it's a good shot of what happens when you don't water lawn, and I think we're all very, very familiar with that. I do think that most of us have recognized that even if you're not going to keep watering your lawn, that there is still some maintenance that you probably want to do, because it'll get weedy, it'll get long, it's going to look pretty bad. And so periodic maintenance is needed to manage those weeds, to control the lawn height, and keep up your landscape's appearance. Lawns are going to grow a lot less when they're not getting water, and as I said before, keeping the lawn a little bit longer than you might typically keep it helps with saving water. And some lawns, if they do get less frequent water, can make it through this season, but no water at all. There's no lawn that's really going to last in that way. But that is a first step, is just turning off the water to your lawn. I talked a little bit about soil solarization, and I mentioned that this is really more for larger commercial applications. Essentially what you do with solarization is that you're using the sun's heat to bake the soil. And so the approach is that this actually is clear plastic being laid over dirt, but you can also use a dark plastic over lawn, and it will do the same thing, and it will kill the lawn. But it's not so much used for getting rid of lawn. It's more for managing pests like insects or soil-borne diseases or seeds. If you're planning to seed after you take out your lawn, some solarization might make some sense. Just because if you have a lot of weed seeds like Bermuda grass or something like that, it can help with that. But I think for most of our residential applications, there are better ways to go than trying to kill your lawn with solarization. But I do mention it because a lot of us have heard of this or seen it happen, and there's a lot of black plastic that gets used. But it's not a method that I necessarily recommend. So the third method that we talked about was applying herbicide. And I've got a little series of photographs from a project that did that. And applying herbicide may not be your first choice, but if you do have a lot of weeds, or you have Bermuda grass, or you've got some other difficult type situations, that can be one way to help get rid of those in the area, so that when you start over with new mulch or planting, you don't have all of these weeds in there. So I don't necessarily recommend against it, but there may be better ways to go. But in any case, this is the LaRue median that the university did a project on and continue to keep planted. So their first step was to go in and kill the lawn with an herbicide. And that's what it looked like. And then they had a bunch of work crews out there to plant in the dead lawn. And they installed some areas that were trees and shrubs, and they installed some areas that were wildflower plantings. And the end result was really quite gorgeous. So on the bottom are some shrubs that are really great for drought tolerance, and on the top are the wildflower seedings that just was a profusion of wildflowers. I see a question, but I'm going to keep questions till the end, if that's okay, so that we can get through the presentation, and then everybody will have a chance to answer some questions, unless you're not hearing me again. So I am going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions, because I'm sure you may have some. Okay, so the fourth method that I talked about was just cutting the sod and getting rid of it, just cart it away. Which can be very effective. For example, instead of herbicides, that's a way to go. And you can rent a sod cutter from a local rental company, or if you know someone that has one, you can borrow one. And then what you're doing is completely removing the turf. And if you want to be planting right away, that is one technique that you could use. And so in this case, you go through with the sod cutter, and it digs under the sod, and it leaves all, or the lawn, and it leaves all the pieces kind of in a row, and then you can roll it up and cart it away, just like in the opposite effect of when you lay out sod. But the issues with getting rid of grass this way is that you're left with all of this material, and what are you going to do with it? And I would like to caution you, you can get more information from the city, but you need to plan ahead for what you're going to do with all of that landscape material. If you have a very small quantity of sod and you get most of the dirt off the roots, you can put some of that material in your street side waste, but you can't expect to put a lot of material out there that is filled with dirt. It's very, very heavy. It's not acceptable to put that material in your garbage can. So really, if you have a huge amount of grass that has been removed with a sod cutter, your best option is to rent a bin from Davis Waste Removal. And that can run into a little bit of money. So it certainly is an approach that can be used and has immediate effect, but there are some things you need to plan ahead for with doing that. Okay, so method 5 is the one I talked about with sheet mulching. And as I mentioned at the first talk in May, I've become a real convert. If what you really want to do is totally get rid of your lawn, this method is simple and environmentally sound. You can plant right away, or you can wait until the rainy season. It takes a bit of time to do, but you're basically composting your grass right in place. So I'm going to show you some pictures about There have been a lot of examples of where this has been done. Someone from the Arboretum, Stacy Parker, has some pictures that I've got in the slideshow here, and her website is available online at the Arboretum. Village Homes has done a number of different projects with sheet mulching, and I have some pictures from that. So what I want to do is go through some photographs first that give you an overview, and then I'll give you some more specific information about how to do it. And as I said early on, some of these methods can either be combined, or if you use one and not the other, some of the information does apply. So the advantages of sheet mulching, and I'm going to be showing you the pictures in a minute, are that as compared to taking off your grass and maybe composting it yourself, one benefit is that your grass turns into, I've got a fly buzzing around me, so I'm making kind of funny faces. You're basically composting right in place. You don't have to move anything, and you've got those nutrients right in the ground. Using the sheet mulching, in addition to getting rid of your grass, effectively keeps weeds out as well because of the mulch and the cardboard. So that's a real benefit for when you want to plant. You don't need to use herbicides or treat your lawn or get rid of it. And if you've heard of permaculture, this is a permaculture technique. So that's something that many of us are trying to move toward. And in the end, after you've done this, you have a rich, fertile soil to plant in because of the mulch and the composted lawn underneath.